Okay, so this is going to be a very interesting video indeed. You've heard of the term auto by author before, right? If you have not heard of the term auto by author before, allow me to explain it to you. It is a situation where you fall so desperately in love with an author, Brandon Sanderson, that the moment they release a book, you are knowing in your mind that you're automatically going to buy it just because your favorite author has released it. Well, for every term out there, there is an opposite. And so today, that's what I'm going to be discussing with you. My auto don't buy authors. That is, if I see that an author is going to release a book, I automatically know I am not going to purchase said book. I have 5 authors to discuss with you today. I'm going to discuss the reason why I no longer purchase from them, what I thought of their books so far, all that kind of stuff. So if this sounds interesting to you, just wait, because we're going to get right into it. So I'm going to start with the only author that I have on this list, who I don't have any physical books of anymore because I've already unhauled them. So I'm just going to say coming in at number 5, but quite frankly, there is no ranking order for them. Coming in at number 5 is the Mr. Fantasy, if you don't count Brandon Sanderson, otherwise known as JRR Tolkien. If you have been with me since the inception of this channel, basically, then I'm sure you have heard me talk about JRR Tolkien to death. How he is just not the author for me, and how his books just don't work for me. Now, when I say that JRR Tolkien is an auto not buy for me, I say this having read a number of his books. I read 4 of his books. I read The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. I did not like any of them. Why did I read them? Well, in April last year, I was celebrating one of my friend's birthdays. In honor of that birthday, I decided to read the canonical works of films that she absolutely loves, The Lord of the Rings. So I gave all 4 books immunity. Yes, I came up with a crazy idea that no matter how I felt about any of these books, I was not allowed to DNF them. Well, is it hard to imagine that after I got through all 4 of those books, I did away with that rule, and now I can DNF any book I want to? I just didn't like any of these books. JRR Tolkien is overly descriptive, and that really annoyed me. I also really struggled with his writing style, being forced to listen to all of these books through audiobook because I found them incredibly tough to physically read on their own. However, my biggest issue with JRR Tolkien, and in particular with the Lord of the Rings series, is that we have high action scenes that do take place. Oh yes, we most definitely do. They just take place off screen, because why would we want to get involved in that stuff? Why would we want to watch that? I mean, come on, it's JRR Tolkien. Let it happen off screen, and then have the character who was involved in that come into the screen and say, guess what? I was just in a high action situation, and now let me partaketh in your brandy and tell you, beguile you of what I have just experienced. And we are basically left sitting there having them retell us what they experienced rather than seeing it ourselves. This is what I call info dumping and exposition, and I don't like it. Do I appreciate what JRR Tolkien did for fantasy? 100%. If not for Tolkien, we may not have the likes of Brandon Sanderson. Admittedly, Sanderson has said that part of his inspiration did come from JRR Tolkien. So I do appreciate what he's done for the genre overall, my most loved genres when it comes to books, but his books themselves, they're just not for me. So JRR Tolkien is absolutely 100% unequivocally an non-auto-buy author for me. Coming in at number 4 is Peter Swanson. I am holding the one and only book that I have read of his ever, and that is Every Value Break. This is an adult mystery thriller. Mr. Swanson is definitely an auto not by author for me. Despite the fact that I've only read 1 of his books, and some of you may say, Mr. Francy, you haven't given him enough of a chance. My friends, this book was enough for me to know that Peter Swanson is not the author for me. But in case that's not satisfying you, allow me to say I have done a lot more research, and somehow incidentally, without really even trying, I have seen other booktubers talk about other books that he has written and certain complaints they've had with those books, which mirror the complaints I have with this one. So if this is just Peter Swanson and who he is as an author, then I just don't want to read any more of his works. What can I say having read this book? My biggest concern and issue with this book is that it is marketed as a thriller/mystery, and yet there was nothing thrilling about it. In fact, we get to a certain section in this book where it seems like something thrillerish is going to happen. The setup has occurred. We have the characters right where we want them. Let's now jump into the thrillering moment. Oh, no, wait, Peter Swanson doesn't want it to be thrilling, so after ending a chapter that seems like it's going to get really dark now, suddenly it's, oh no, I was just kidding, and everything's fine, and sunshine and daisies and roses. Why was this marketed as a thriller when it's not even thrilling? The reveal also 100% let me down. And as I said, I've only read one of his works, but the reviews that I've seen of other books he's done and the complaints other people have seem to mirror the issues I have with this one. Peter Swanson is definitely an auto not buy for me. Look very quickly when I speak about the third author that is an auto not buy for me, because this book is not going to linger in the frame for that long at all. I am talking about Naomi Kanakia, who is the author of We Are Totally Normal. Okay, you're no longer going to see that book in the frame anymore because I do not believe in giving any light or any type of publicity at all to an author who is as offensive as Naomi Kanakia. I don't want to say too much here because I try to keep my channel as light and fluffy and fun as I can, despite the fact that this is a negative-ish emotional video, but I could really go over the top here, but I'm going to just try and keep things short and succinct and as neutral as I possibly can. So, very recently I read We Are Totally Normal by Naomi Kanakia, and the book is completely offensive to members of the LGBTIQ+ community. It is a book that follows a boy by the name of Nundan, who ends up getting into a relationship with a gay guy. Nundan is straight, although he is questioning his sexuality. He finds out really quickly that he is most definitely straight, and in fact is repulsed by the guy he has gotten with. He's decided he's going to remain in this relationship and continue to manipulate the guy that he is with, purely for the sake of social status, because, well, in this world, being gay is the in thing, and so that's what he's going to do. He is also manipulating the girls around him because he believes if he tells everyone that he is gay, that he will gain the confidence of the women and get to be closer to them, not only metaphorically, but physically, and that he can use that. Isn't that fantastic? Also, Naomi Kanakia has said on her Twitter account that not everyone's going to love this book, but she hopes that people out there that are like Nundan will appreciate that they are being represented in books. Are you kidding me? That is all the airtime that Naomi Kanakia is going to get from me. I am never going to purchase another one of her books. Coming in at number 2 is the famous romance authoring duo, Christina Lauren. And I can talk to you guys about this in quite a wealth of knowledge way because I've read 3 of their books, and the third book that I read was the proverbial guillotine coming down on this authoring duo. I'm never going to read their works again. So let's quickly go through the star ratings, shall we? The first book of theirs I read was this one, In a Holidays. I gave this book 2 stars. The second book I read from theirs was Roomies. They bounced back. This one got 4 stars. The third and final book I read of theirs was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, and I gave this book 2 stars. This book I gave 2 stars because it came with a promise that we are going to have the Groundhog Day trope being represented in this book, where the day repeats over and over again, and in my opinion it did not repeat enough. Not only that, but the romance in this book does not take place until the final quarter, and it is so rushed that even though it's fiction, you want some sort of authenticity with our fictional characters. It just did not feel authentic to me at all, so it got 2 stars. They bounced back with Roomies. I actually enjoyed this one. I really find it funny. A lot of people who love Christina Lauren don't like this book. It's their least favourite of all the books. I get that because I don't like them as authors, so I loved this. I gave it 4 stars. It was fantastic. Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, as I said, was that proverbial guillotine coming down onto the necks of Christina and Lauren. and let me explain why. This book was okay. Dual perspective, we follow Josh and Hazel. Hazel is incredibly eccentric and loves it, and she's not ashamed to show it. She's known Josh for a very long time, but they've never gotten together. She's always had a crush on him. It's called Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating because they become friends and they set each other up on horrible dates to prove that they don't have to date each other. That was fine. I could deal with that too. Not my favorite story in the world, but I could definitely deal with it. Then we get to the end of the second last chapter. Don't worry, I'm not spoiling you here. We get to the end of the second last chapter where the climax begins. Yes, it takes all the way to the second last chapter for the climax to begin. The second last chapter ends in a way where the climax looks like it's really about to take off. One thing happens and the chapter ends and you're like, oh, here we go, it's getting interesting. And then the final chapter opens up with a time jump. Not days, not weeks, not months, but 6 years in the future. And instead of our characters going through and everything that they go through in the final climax and us getting to experience it, we instead in the final chapter with the perspective of Hazel get her saying, so it's now 6 years later and this is basically what ended up happening. Are you kidding me? That does not work for me. So you might ask, why did I read Christina Lauren? Well, I had a goal this year to read 6 straight romance books. I also have a goal to read 12 LGBTIQ plus books, hence the differentiation. A lot of people have recommended Christina Lauren to me, so I bought not 1, not 2, but 3 of their books in a row before I even read the first one. I read all 3 to give them as much of a chance as I possibly could, but nay sir, Christina Lauren, the authoring adult romance duo authors, are definitely going to be not by authors for me anymore. Coming in at number 1 is an author who I have come up with my own terminology for when it comes to my channel. That is right, coming in at number 1, we are talking about Suzanne Collins, and the terminology that I use on this channel is the Suzanne Collins curse. So, what is the Suzanne Collins curse? Allow me to explain as I discuss with you why Suzanne Collins is an not by author for me. I went into reading The Hunger Games last year for the first time, never having read it, never having seen the films, knowing absolutely nothing about it. For all I knew, The Hunger Games was a game where people are starved and the first to say I'm hungry is eliminated. I read this first book and man did I fall in love with this book. It is a YA dystopian that involves a game, but it involves a game in a very tyrannical dystopian way, and yet it just was fantastic. Fast-paced, high action, you feel like your life's on the line as you're going through the entire book. It was wonderful. I don't have books 2 and 3 on me, let me explain. Went over to book 2 and I was really excited to see what was going to happen in book 2 because the way book 1 ended, something happened at the end that had me incredibly excited for something that was bound to come up in book number 2. Unfortunately, Suzanne Collins had a plot twist in book number 2, so what I wanted to see happen didn't happen. But I didn't end up holding that against the book because book number 2 still ended up being a really good book and I ended up loving it. Not as much as book 1, but I still did love it. I think I gave it 4 stars. Enter in the book that we used to call on this channel the book we don't talk about, and now that book is the one that I told you earlier on. But the former book we didn't talk about was Mockingjay, book number 3 in this series, the concluding book to the Hunger Games series. I do not count A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes because I don't want to read it. Let me explain why. Without giving away spoilers, book number 3 does something so heinous that Suzanne Collins became an author not by for me. Suzanne Collins caught lightning in a bottle with books number 1 and book number 2. With book number 3, she grabbed that lightning she caught in the bottle, she smashed it on the floor into a million different pieces, swept it up, and threw it away into the trash can, and then wrote the joke of a book that we call the Mockingjay. It just made absolutely no sense to me why she went down that path. It never makes any sense to me when any author of a book, creator of a TV show, creator of a film series, whatever it is, captures lightning in a bottle, and then they decide to smash it on the floor and do away with what that proverbial lightning was. it just does not make sense to me at all. So book number 3 just completely let me down. Other than that, it had a ton of flaws. Because I felt like the carpet was absolutely ripped out from under me, because I was expecting this lightning that was caught in a bottle to heavily feature in book number 3, I was completely let down also. So therefore, the action of having caught lightning in a bottle, throwing it on the floor where it is smashed into a million shards, and then sweeping it up and throwing it away in the trash can and writing something completely different compared to what your readers absolutely love, I now refer to as the Suzanne Collins curse. And because Suzanne Collins did this, it has left a mark on me that is saying and screaming, Suzanne Collins is an auto not by author for me. I will never buy any of her books again. Hence, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes will never feature on this channel because I just can't go through that heartache again. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. Sunshine, daisies, and roses and rainbows, all to feature in our next video. I promise. But until then, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading!